Good evening. So we're continuing to look at the true origins, the second of the Four Noble Truths, true origins being the origin of our samsaric existence. And these are namely karma and afflictions. So we've been looking at, most recently, at who, as in which beings, accumulate virtuous and non-virtuous karma. So we saw in the final bit that we looked at last time that Arya beings do not newly accumulate propelling karma. So those who accumulate propelling karma are those who are not Arya beings. So those on the ordinary paths, the paths of accumulation and preparation, as well as those who have yet to attain a path, the most ordinary of beings. Immediately starting where we finished last week, at the bottom of page 173, the very last sentence. And I've just inserted a few words in the Tibetan that were mixed in the first sentence over the page. So reading from how karma is accumulated at the bottom of page 173. If, with that body, you create non-virtuous actions by means of the three doors, for instance, killing, you will accumulate non-meritorious karma. If you create virtuous actions of the desire realm, such as giving gifts and guarding ethics, you will accumulate meritorious karma. If you cultivate the shamatha or karma abiding and the like included in the form realm dhyanas or concentrations, and the levels of the formless realm, you will accumulate immovable karma. This ties to what we looked at last week, the bottom of the point above, in terms of different types of karma. So karma can be presented as meritorious and non-meritorious and immovable. So in a threefold division. And as we saw then last time, meritorious karma is virtuous karma, so another way to describe it. And non-meritorious karma is non-virtuous karma, so again, another way to describe it. And then the third, immovable karma. So the karma that propels rebirth in the desire realm, whether into the lower realms or the higher realms, is going to be either meritorious or non-meritorious karma, or virtuous and non-virtuous karma. And the karma that propels rebirth into the form and formless realm is that of immovable karma. So where we concluded last week was the sentence starting, if with that body you create, so if with that body, this then is referring to those beings, whomever they are, accumulate propelling karma. If with that body you create non-virtuous actions by means of the three doors being our body, speech and mind. So if we were to accumulate non-virtuous actions by means of the body, that would be, for example, killing. By way of our speech would be, for example, lying. And by way of mental karma would be, as for example, harmful intent, covetousness, and so forth. So reading further, for instance, killing. You will accumulate non-meritorious karma. So non-meritorious karma accumulated, non-meritorious karma, should it propel a rebirth, it will be a rebirth in the desire realm, in particular into the lower realms. And it continues. If you create virtuous actions, and then the missing words, of the desire realm, such as giving gifts is just a less common translation of generosity. So such as generosity and guarding ethics, you will accumulate meritorious karma. The final sentence here. If you cultivate the shamatha and the like, so if you cultivate the shamatha and the like included in the form realm dhyanas and the levels of, so I usually use the English there, concentrations, and the levels of the formless realm, you accumulate immovable karma. So with a mind of karma abiding, there the propelling karma that one accumulates is immovable karma, and leads to rebirth in either one of the concentrations or one of the levels of the form realm, or into one of the levels of the formless realm. So that then concludes this second outline, how karma is thereby accumulated. Just to go back to this sentence, at the top of page 174, if you create virtuous actions of the desire realm, such as generosity and guarding ethics. So here it's specifically stating, Lama Tsongkhapa specifically stating, of the desire realm. So if one accumulates a virtue within the desire realm, should it ripen as a propelling karmic imprint, it will lead to rebirth in the happy migrations in the desire realm. Should, though, a formless realm god accumulate virtue, say of ethics, they do not accumulate let me say it clearly. Should a formless realm being accumulate virtue of, for example, ethics, this virtue accumulated is virtue, virtuous karma, but it does not become a propelling karmic imprint that can lead to rebirth in the desire realm. Because, and the difference here is, the realm within which the being is who accumulated the virtue. So a being in the form realm who accumulates the virtue of ethics and so forth, that virtue cannot lead to propelling a rebirth in the desire realm, because they are not in the desire realm. Whereas a desire realm being who accumulates virtue, that virtue, should it propel a rebirth, will propel a rebirth in the higher realm, the happy migrations of the desire realm. So what this point answers is the question, does virtue accumulated by means of, for example, ethical restraint, does it necessarily lead to propelling a rebirth in the happier migrations? And the answer is not necessarily. So if it is such virtue is accumulated by a desire realm being and it propels a rebirth, that will lead to a rebirth as a human or god in the desire realms. But if a form realm being accumulates that virtue, it will not propel rebirth into the desire realm. Likewise, Arya beings of any type, where the virtue that they accumulate, for example, of ethical restraint, for example, that too does not lead to rebirth in the happier migrations of the desire realm as a human or god. What leads to the what is a propelling karmic imprint that leads to rebirth in the form or formless realm is a karmic imprint of the type immovable karma. So therefore, a desire realm being who accumulates the virtue of, for example, ethical restraint, that karma can propel a rebirth, but only into the happy migrations in the desire realm. So as a human or god of the desire realm, it cannot lead to a rebirth in the form or formless realm. The only karmic imprints or type of karma that can lead, type of propelling karma that can lead to rebirth in the form or formless realm is that attained from karma biding, so shamatha. So if a practitioner has attained the karma biding and developed it into the mind of the first concentration, so the karma biding of the first concentration, they will thereby accumulate immovable karma, which can propel rebirth into the first concentration, but only into the first concentration. It cannot propel a rebirth into any other concentration, the second, the third, the fourth, nor into the formless realm. Hence, it is immovable. It can only lead to the propulsion of a rebirth into that level of that particular realm. So again, if a practitioner has attained the karma biding, which is the karma biding of the first concentration, that propelling karma they accumulate can only propel one type of rebirth, and that is as a god of the first level of the form realm, not to any other level, and so forth with other levels of the form and formless realm. So from this, some key points. To cultivate the propelling cultivate the propelling karmic imprints to be born in the form or formless realms, it is indispensable that karma binding needs to be attained. Without the cultivation of karma binding, one does not accumulate immovable karma, and it is immovable karma alone that can propel rebirth into the form and formless realms. So that then leads to a question. If a desire realm being attains karma binding, will they necessarily then be reborn into the form or formless realm? And the answer is not necessarily. Because a desire realm being, if they attain karma binding but don't go on to suppress the afflictions of the desire realm, when death comes, the desire realm afflictions will lead to rebirth being taken once again in the desire realm. So therefore, to achieve rebirth in the form or formless realm, it's imperative that not only is karma binding attained, but the afflictions of the desire realm are suppressed. So now continuing in the text to the next outline. So this is how you die and are reborn. So this is a subpoint 3. Subpoint 2 was on the previous page, how karma is thereby accumulated. And the first of these 3 divisions was at the beginning of chapter 12 on page 167. So first afflictions were looked at, then karma, and now karma is concluded. And now we come to the process of rebirth or transmigration. So here we see this has 5 points. How you die and are reborn is 5 points. Conditions for death, the minds of death, from where the heat withdraws, how the intermediate state is reached after death, and then how you take rebirth in an incarnation. So the first of these 5 points is the conditions for death. Because for death to come, then various conditions are required. So what those are, the 3 will be presented. Then the second of the 5, the minds of death. So this refers to whether the mind is virtuous, whether the mind is non-virtuous, or the mind is unspecified. There it's often translated as neutral, but unspecified is good. So virtuous, non-virtuous, or unspecified. Yeah. That's the second. And so the minds of death refer to just before one dies. So it's not after one's died, but just before. Okay, so just to say that more precisely, so the second one, the minds of death, refers to the 3, virtuous, non-virtuous, or unspecified. So it specifically refers to the mind at death, so that last mind at death. Then the third outline, sub-outline, will be from where the heat withdraws. So where the heat withdraws down to the heart is either going to be from the crown down to the heart or from the feet up to the heart. So as the heat withdraws, then the body becomes cold. So either it's going to go from the crown or from the feet towards the heart. The fourth is how the intermediate state is reached after death. So this is the process of moving from this human form by means of the intermediate state or the bardo into the next life. But this is from the human state into the intermediate state. And the final sub-outline is how you take rebirth in an incarnation. So this rebirth is from the bardo, from the intermediate state, into one's new, usually form, into one's new body. So this follows a process of death in the intermediate state, and then rebirth into one's new life. Those are the 5 sub-outlines for how you die and are reborn. And now to look at the first, conditions for death. So there are 3 conditions for death. So specifying the 3. To die from the exhaustion of one's lifespan is the first. Then 2 lines down. To die following the exhaustion of one's merit. And then the third, to die by failing to avoid dangers. So looking at the first. To die from the exhaustion of one's lifespan is to die when the time has come when one's entire lifespan propelled by previous karma is exhausted. So to die from the exhaustion of one's lifespan is to die when the time has come when one's entire lifespan is propelled by previous karma is exhausted. So in one's life previous to this, one accumulated the karma that determines the length of one's life. And when the strength of that karma, or the potential of that karma is exhausted, then death comes. Or as it says, one's time has come, when the time for one's death comes, and one's life ends, because the strength of that karmic imprint that has now been depleted, and therefore one's life ends. So this may be 60 years or 100 years, whatever it may be, but that is the maximum limit to which one's karma can allow one, or enable one to live. Such a person would probably have excellent conditions. They may be in good health, their body seems fine, but when their lifespan is exhausted, death comes. So this perhaps could be like dying from old age. There's no discernible reason that a person has deceased. It's just their body has given up. And this would be they're having come from the exhaustion of their lifespan. And that's the first condition. And the second, to die following the exhaustion of one's merit is, for example, to die from a lack of basic requirements or necessities for life. So necessities for life, or one's basic requirements, these come from one's merit. And so if one has insufficient merit, one will not be able to, for example, have sufficient to eat, or not be able to keep oneself warm in a cold climate. And therefore, when one's merit is insufficient or exhausted, then death can follow. How then does one accumulate the karma that one will have a long lifespan? So this comes from accumulating karma by means of saving the lives of those who may otherwise die. So in our experience, maybe this is less likely with humans, but certainly for animals this is possible. For example, if one is mindful and notices an insect just in a puddle of water, we can very easily rescue it and allow it to continue to live out its life. So in that way, one accumulates merit to have a long life. And other means will be assisting those who are ill, whether humans or animals, being a support to those in need in this way. And then in terms of the causes for basic requirements or necessities, so this of course comes from generosity, so from material generosity. So we see here the causes to have basic requirements met. This comes through material generosity, and then to help beings have to accrue the causes to have a long life. This can come through the generosity of fearlessness. And the third condition for death is to die by failing to avoid dangers. So here, dangers we should understand as by being in a dangerous environment, and it certainly would include things like, we'd probably say in English, an accident. So for example, being involved in a car accident. So these are the kinds of dangers that if one fails to avoid them, it can lead to being a condition for death. Then an illustration is given, includes the 9 causes and conditions for death, such as, so overeating, I suppose, is okay, but the Tibetan's a bit more explicit. Eating without limit. So it's really, it's overeating to quite an extreme, taught in the sutras. So we see here, to die by failing to avoid dangers includes the 9 causes and conditions for death, such as overeating, taught in the sutras. So those 9, if you have the text, they're mentioned at the back, but to mention them now. So the first is overeating, which again is really eating without a limit. So it's quite eating a lot. Then that's the first. And the second is eating some. And this first one of, again, eating without limit, we should understand it also to include drinking. So if one drinks excessively, then this can also lead to one's death. So that's the first. And the second, eating something indigestible. So this, again, can be something that is either poisonous in general, or poisonous for use, or unhealthy, something unsuitable to you. Perhaps you have an allergy, something like that. So eating something that is indigestible. The third is, and then just to say again, as I said at the end, that this isn't an exhaustive list, but this is the list from Sutra. So the third then is eating without having digested the previous meal. So one's really piling on excessive food into a full stomach already. So that's the third. The fourth is failing to expel undigested food that has accumulated in the stomach. So it's a lot of eating too much, or eating the wrong things. Then the fifth is intestinal obstruction. So that's one meaning. Again, then said, but it can be elsewhere than the intestine. So, for example, choking. Sixth, not relying on specific medicine for specific illnesses. So this, again, understand more broadly. So it can include taking otherwise harmful substances in the correct manner, or taking the correct substances but in the incorrect manner. Like the doctors, they'll say before a meal or after a meal, this kind of thing. And it can also be, I can't remember the term, but where you're taking medicine and the one medicine interacts with the other in a bad way, and that can lead to death. There's a word for that, but I'm forgetting it. Then that was 7, so number 8, accidental death. So that's similar to what we had before, but here it's more about time of day or time of night, maybe. So going out at night in a dangerous environment. So something like that. So this is accidental death specifically due to wrong time. And then I think I missed one. Yeah, I missed one. Anyway, the order's not important. Then another was failing to understand the distinction between being accustomed or unaccustomed to activities. So this would be doing something that you haven't trained in. So imitating someone who's got a skill to be able to do something which is otherwise dangerous, and one is a bit foolhardy and does this thing, and it leads to one's death. And then the last is certain types of sexual contacts can also lead to untimely death. So perhaps this also refers to sexually transmitted diseases that can perhaps lead to death. So these are the 9 causes and conditions for death taught in the sutras. But as again I said, this isn't an exhaustive list. There are more than these 9. Oops. So the second one, eating something indigestible. So again, this may refer to someone eating something poisonous, but that which is being eaten that is poisonous may be poisonous for that specific person. So, for example, if they have an allergy towards something, others may well eat this and have no problem with the food. So therefore, again, with most of these, to understand them in a broader sense. And then other forms of untimely death could come around to things such as natural calamities, such as earthquakes, floods, being struck by lightning, or various forms of violence that can lead to death, such as warfare and so forth. What it comes down to, this third point, to die by failing to avoid dangers, is that the condition for death is not that one's lifespan is exhausted. One still has an excessive or unused lifespan. And it's not that one's merit is exhausted. One still has merit for requisites. But one meets untimely death due to failing to avoid dangers. If we think back to the presentation last year on death and impermanence, so one of the sub-points in there was that there are so few causes that one can accumulate to sustain one's life. But there are an abundance of causes that can lead to one's death. And that is specifically referring to this third condition for death, by failing to avoid dangers. And saying failing here, it doesn't necessarily mean failing, but in that it's not like one's intentionally doing something dangerous, but rather one encounters an accident. So this third point is very broad. There are many instances within this that leads to one's untimely death. So that's the first of the 5 sub-points in how you die and are reborn. Then the second, the minds of death. So this is referring to the period leading up to one's death. It's not that final moment of death, the mind with which one dies, but rather that ending period of one's life where one is still engaging with what's around you. So when people are in this last segment of their life, they may end up then dying with a virtuous mind, a non-virtuous mind, or thirdly, a mind that is unspecified. So now to read a little bit. Both virtuous minds, such as faith. So this here refers to having the mind of faith as one is approaching death. Faith in the Lama, faith in 3 jewels, and so forth. Or non-virtuous minds, such as attachment, anger, and so forth, arise in the mind. So one can move into this final period of life with minds that are virtuous, non-virtuous, or unspecified. The key part of what to take from this section is to take this as advice that when one's death is approaching, when one recognizes that death is approaching, that it's important to turn one's mind towards faith and ensure that one's mind is not afflicted. Because here what we are talking about is still a coarse mind. There are subtler minds of death, but here it's being referred to the normal coarser minds of life. So when one recognizes death is approaching, turn your mind towards virtue. It can be virtue such as faith in one's Lama and the 3 jewels, and so forth. And ensure your mind is not being triggered in an afflicted way, so that afflictions arise. For example, attachment to one's wealth and possessions. Because this, at the time of one's death, one recognizes I have to leave it all behind. And some things of great sentimental value. Or if one is covetous and has accrued a lot, then this attachment to sentimental possessions or to one's wealth in general, this can be an obstacle at the time of death. Or attachment to friends and loved ones, a sadness at this impending parting. Also, of course, anger can arise, anger at those around you. So therefore, these kinds of afflictions one needs to guard one's mind against. Both virtuous, so I'll just read these 2 together. Both virtuous minds such as faith and non-virtuous minds such as attachment arise in the mind as long as coarse compositional factors operate, depending on one's own actions or on being made to recall them by others. Order the English and Tibetan vary a little, so we start the 3rd sentence. So how does one direct, or 3rd line, how does one direct, how is it that one's mind ends up being virtuous or non-virtuous as one's death is approaching? So this is by 2 means. Either, depending either on one's own actions, so this is referring to under your own power, you direct your mind to virtue. So you recognize, my end is very close, and you intentionally generate a virtuous mind, recall one's Lama, recall the three jewels and so forth, or being made to recall them by others. So others can direct your mind towards virtue, remind you of the three jewels, remind you of your Lama. So in either way, either that you yourself direct your mind in that direction, or one is assisted by those around you, one's mind can be directed towards virtue. But also, one's mind, under one's own power, or at the direction of others, the direction of others, can be sent in a non-virtuous way, a non-virtuous direction leading to the afflictions arising. So for example, recalling that this is one's final goodbye to one's loved ones, or to the wealth that one values so, or one's cherished possessions, that you're going to have to leave it all behind. And maybe, and this can lead to attachment or anger at knowing that there's squabbling over things. So there's afflictions too can arise, either through one's own power, turning one's own mind in that direction, or those around you, by what they're saying or doing, turning your mind in that direction. So here it says we have arise in the mind as long as coarse compositional factors operate. So this is referring to the quality of consciousness that the dying person still has. They can hear, they can see, they can engage with what's around them. So this is the meaning of coarse compositional factors here. So they are still present, they are still conscious, they are still awake, and they can, to some degree, interact with those around them. But the main thing is their coarse consciousnesses are still working, which means if this person who's now dying has been a Dharma practitioner training their minds, they should be able to quite readily turn their mind under their own volition towards what they have been, the Dharma topics they've been training in. And certainly, if they are accompanied by a companion, a religious companion, then they would help encourage them or assist them in turning their mind to what they have been training in. So, for example, they may show the dying person their prayer book, because that will certainly stimulate memory of their meditations, or show them a Buddha image and so forth. Or they would talk to them about, or encourage them, turn your mind to refuge, generate love, generate compassion. So this would be so beneficial. And this can be done at this point because of there still being these coarse compositional factors operating. So the person can hear and make sense of what is being said, and can be shown images and make sense of what is being shown to them, as well as still having some control over their own mind. And so this is ideally how we ourselves should leave this life, or how we should help others. Certainly what we should try and then avoid is turning their mind in a negative direction. So I don't know how death is managed here in your society, but certainly where I come from, in the villages, it's all too often that at the bedside, families may wail and say, "We will miss you, how are we going to do without you?" And especially if the person's the breadwinner, they may express who's going to look after us, how are we going to survive? And this then can lead to a number of afflictions arising in the person dying. Or there may be conflict or expression of, leave this to me, give me that, or some talk about possessions and wealth. This is really not at all helpful. In fact, it's harmful. And a further point to make is that it's better not to have animals, or pets around at the time of someone's passing, because of the strong bond that the dying person may well have with their pet. Attachment may well arise towards their beloved pet, and this attachment for the animal may well lead to leading to rebirth in the lower realms. So there it's better not to have pets in the vicinity. And rather, as I said before, especially if the person is a practitioner, to turn them back to their meditation topics and encourage them, help them recall their meditation topics. So that first sentence there, we looked at dying with a virtuous mind and dying with a non-virtuous mind. Now, in the next sentence, we look at to die with an unspecified mind. So unspecified, what it means is it's not specified in sutra. That's the actual literal from the Tibetan. Unspecified mind, or if you know neutral, neutral is in ethically neutral, not virtuous or non-virtuous. So to die with an unspecified mind implies that one did not recall virtuous or non-virtuous minds by oneself, nor was one reminded of them by others. So as it says here, one may well die with an unspecified mind, so again, not specified in sutra or ethically neutral mind, because one either under one's own strength of mind hasn't turned one's mind to virtue, nor has an affliction arisen, nor have those around you encouraged you or guided you towards something virtuous, or if they have, you haven't followed that. Or those around you haven't led to an affliction arising. Then one's mind is unspecified. So then we can conclude here for tonight, and we'll start then with the next sentence tomorrow. So there the first thing is we'll look at what appearances appear to the dying person. So we'll start there tomorrow. But if you have questions now, then feel free to ask.
It's wondering, when contemplate death, it seems like very obviously it's a very big deal, and it seems very difficult to have a virtuous mind at death. It seems very easy for afflictions to arise. But it seems also that the sort of Dharma practitioner or something, there will be a combination of things going on. But it's often emphasised that the throwing karma or propelling karma.
It's often emphasised.
The propelling karma
is
like the final one that determines the rebirth. And one that seems that might be more simplified, is it sort of a bit more complex than just that last final thought or impression where it's an afflictive mind or a virtue, or is it a combination of different things that influence that kind of?
So what I usually hear is that what determines the next rebirth is that last mind that ripens at the end of life, at the last moment of life, that if it's virtuous, it'll propel a good rebirth. If it's non-virtuous, it'll propel a rebirth to the low realms. But here we're talking about sending the mind in a direction a bit before that. So is what I normally understand, is that correct, or is it there's a bit more to it than that?
Yeah, and is it the case that, yeah, is it more complex in terms of the combination of different sort of impressions going on in the mind?
So the propelling karmic imprint that propels our next rebirth, this is usually something accumulated earlier in the life at some point. Earlier in the life at some point it is accumulated. When it ripens, it propels our next rebirth. But before it ripens, we try and get our mind in a virtuous direction so as to aid the ripening of a virtuous propelling karmic imprint rather than a non-virtuous karmic imprint. And that's what's being discussed here. So to give an analogy, when one buys, before one travels, one buys one's ticket, one's airline ticket. So that is like one accrues the propelling karmic imprint. So it's been accumulated, you've now got your ticket, it's sitting on your phone, but you're only traveling in a few weeks or few months' time. Then we arrive at the airport and you've been directed, hopefully, to the right gate. So this is like going to the right gate, is like generating the virtuous mind, so that the journey goes well. And then when one gets onto one's plane and it's now ready to embark, then it's like the propelling karmic imprint has ripened. So it's a sequential process. So the propelling karmic imprint is accumulated previously. But one has many propelling karmic imprints. So as to help bring about the ripening of a virtuous one turns one's mind in a virtuous direction as death nears. Because we have all accumulated many complete karmic imprints, which means we have many potential propelling karmic imprints on our continuum, so as to increase the likelihood that it is a virtuous propelling karmic imprint that ripens at the time of death. One goes through this process of having a virtuous mind, because that makes it much more likely a virtuous karmic imprint will ripen than if one, as death is approaching, if one's mind is afflicted, then it makes it much more likely a non-virtuous propelling karmic imprint will ripen. So there's more to say on that, because there are differing presentations, but we'll discuss it more tomorrow. Okay. Cameron?
Just looking at the question of the definition of merit. In the past, we've talked about the definition of merit being the generation of the potential to engage in virtuous action.
Okay.
And I was just wondering if we have a simple definition of merit here, because this doesn't seem to be what we're talking about here.
Where what that?
In the past,
Merit and virtue, it's different words, but it's the same thing.
merit. Yeah, the potential to engage in subsequent virtuous action. So generating minds that lead to virtuous actions. Merit.
Okay.
That's a definition I've heard in the past. I was wondering if there's a simple definition here, because that doesn't seem to cover what we're talking about here.
So virtue and merit are the same. Virtue and merit are the same. So I'm not sure where you heard that before. I don't think it was from me as a translator, but we covered this at the end of last week, so it's like just above there. Meritorious karma is virtuous karma included in the level of the desire realm.
So if we were to say,
where there is where merit is used in a different way is where you talk about the two accumulations. So here the word virtue doesn't come up. The accumulation of merit and the accumulation of wisdom. The accumulation of wisdom is performed with a wisdom understanding emptiness, and the accumulation of merit is virtue that is devoid of the wisdom understanding emptiness. So in this context, we use the word merit alone in the accumulation of merit and the accumulation of wisdom. But otherwise, merit and wisdom are the same. Merit and virtue are the same. And this particular context that we are looking at here is that of propelling karma. So we're having this threefold division of meritorious, non-meritorious, and then before immovable.
so is there a store of merit? Do we create a store of merit?
Okay, So the store of merit, let's say, because you saw my hesitation in asking, because this is more of like a way of speaking in English. What it is literally in Tibetan is the accumulation of merit or the accumulation of virtue. So store or merit. It's a noun or a verb. And in the Tibetan, it's just going to be accumulation of merit or accumulation of virtue. So where does this abide? It abides on the mental consciousness. So that is where it is accumulated or stored. So when you talk about it,
when it's sitting in the consciousness,
Yeah.
is this a potential then to engage in virtuous action?
so when there's the karma is accumulated karma on the consciousness, does this have the potential to lead to further virtue? So the virtuous and non-virtuous imprints are stored on our continuum. And where you have virtue or non-virtue of a particular type, and you have a lot of it of that particular type, you will with relative ease accumulate that kind of virtue or non-virtue because of the stronger accumulation, or as we say in other contexts, the stronger familiarity. Because that is we're very familiar to a particular deed because of our having done it many times, and therefore have many of those imprints. And where we have only sparse particular types of virtuous or non-virtuous imprints, to once again engage in that virtuous or non-virtuous action is much more difficult, just because the familiarity is weaker, or to express it in this way, we have less potency, less strength, less imprints on our continuum. So it's kind of saying the same thing in differing ways. Because if you have a lot of imprints of a particular type, you have a stronger familiarity from accumulating those many imprints. Therefore, it's much easier to do this similar action again.
Is merit then a cause of favourable outcomes?
So favourable outcomes.
So virtuous karma being a thing that leads to favourable, subsequent favourable outcomes. Merit then a store of something that leads to favourable outcomes.
So favourable outcomes, I'm going to need to say it as something like happiness as opposed to suffering. So which will then, I'm asking, does virtue lead to happiness? And I don't think that's what you want me to ask, because because it's clear. But that is favourable outcomes.
I'm not absolutely
Yeah, but that is it. So when I put it how it is then expressed in Tibetan, then it becomes, the answer becomes clear.
Part of the reason I ask this is sometimes people question the existence of merit at all. So having a clear description of what exactly it is that's happening is useful.
Okay, so now we know that it's the same as virtue. If that helps. And what is virtue is what leads to happiness, and non-virtue leads to suffering. That's also been said before. Okay. Then it okay. Thank you, Stephen. Tomorrow, more time for questions.